Chelsea, welcome back to the Create podcast, formerly known as Art and Cocktails. I'm so excited to chat with you again. I'm such a fan of your work. And just for our listeners tuning in, if you haven't met Chelsea yet, we have an episode from I think about a year ago when her previous book came out. And now we are here to celebrate the Shadow Path. Welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be back.
So excited. So, for our listeners who might be new to you, just a quick intro. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do before we dive into this beautiful new title.
Absolutely. Well, my name's Chelsea. I am a tarot reader and a writer, and I work with witchy and creative practices in a really accessible way. So my first two books, the Tarot Spreads Yearbook and Tarot for Creativity, focus on accessing the tarot not as a fortune-telling tool, but as an inspiration and self-reflection tool. And my third book, The Shadow Path, which we're going to talk about today, expands on that spiritual practice of creative work. It draws on some tarot, but really moves more into psychology and into occultic practices that are older than psychology, and really beautiful to work with as well.
Beautiful. So, as we're entering a darker season, my
Mhm.
favorite time of the year, I do feel like the veil is a little bit thinner. There's not as much daylight. I think it's a perfect opportunity for us to explore the shadow path. And of course, knowing what I know about your tarot research and the practices that you have with that, what inspired you to write this book? And why do you think it's important for us humans and creatives to explore the shadow at this time?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, I suppose I should start by saying the idea of the shadow essentially is the parts of us that are buried deep within us. It can mean something positive, it can mean something negative, but the idea is they're things that for whatever reason we're afraid to look at. Sometimes that's a toxic trait or a fear, something we've been told is bad. Sometimes it's as simple as not feeling confident about that thing, whether it's an artistic pursuit or something about your personality that just feels a little intimidating. It might be something that you hide down because you're not sure how to approach it. It may be difficult memories, it may be something else, but the real core about the shadow is that it's just not something that we are consciously illuminating in the way we touch on the world. And that to me has always been interesting. I was a theater practitioner and a writer and an artist long before I really touched the tarot and got into how our spirituality and creativity intersect. So I was always really interested in the subtext. The shadow is for us artists another way of thinking about what's underneath the surface of our pieces. So that's always been very interesting to me. And when I started to work with tarot cards and really think about them in a creative context, that element of the shadow was just naturally very present. I was interested in it without knowing what to call it, or that it had a psychological or deeply spiritual name. The idea of the shadow is a metaphor as well. But as I got more deeply into my tarot work and started writing my first book, the Tarot Spreads Yearbook, there's an entire chapter called The Season of Shadow, where we really touch on those elements. And so through that process, I got very interested in the psychological side and went on to get a certification in shadow work, studying Carl Jung's psychological approach to the shadow and to archetypes, and really then developed the idea that just like the tarot, the idea of shadow in psychology has a creative application, and I wanted to make that available in book form. So here we are.
Yeah, beautiful. You did such a great job at translating these sometimes intimidating tools into tools that creatives and artists can use to support their practice or do personal work, inner work that we are all always so in need of. Now, this book is really interesting because it's a journey. It's not like something you just read. I mean, you can read it, I'm sure, but it is a very interactive title. And I do love that because it's an invitation to slow down. It's not about like trying to get as much knowledge per se as possible, even though you do have a lot of research and introduction and context. But can you walk us through how you designed this 10-week journey and what would you say to someone who might feel intimidated in diving into this work because it can feel a little uncomfortable, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I would start by saying that I really view all of my work, all of my writing, everything that I do as a facilitation as a journey. My previous two books share that element with the shadow path, that I want it to be something that you pick up and work with. I want you to feel like you're not just picking up a book to read, you're picking up a workshop to engage with. I really want to engage the practice in all of my work. And so my previous books looked at tarot, and the tarot has a natural structure to it. I wanted to make sure that I was providing a structure to readers of the shadow path, which shadow work and Jungian psychology can feel very academic, very dense. And so I thought, what if I distilled a journey to meeting your shadow, to just doing that initial work of even getting comfortable with the idea that there are parts of yourself that you've buried, things that maybe you want to start to approach in your life, in your art, in a very gentle guide. I've always been inspired by Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way. I think that that 12-week program is brilliant. She's got a what I think even better 6-week program called the Listening Path that I've always been really inspired by. And so I wanted to create a journey for creatives that was even softer than those. And so there is the Shadow Path, which is a 10-week guide through what it means to claim to meet your shadow, to claim your shadow, and to start really toying with the idea of being creative with those parts of yourself that maybe you haven't felt free to express before.
Thank you for sharing that. It's beautiful. And I actually have not checked out the listening path, so I'm gonna have to do that. But one thing I want to just dive into real quick is, can we talk about what this actually looks like for someone?
Mhm.
Because of course we can talk about, self-development and shadow work and getting to know ourselves in deeper ways, but what would that look like for an artist? And I know when you were in my membership, you shared a personal example. Can you talk a little bit about what that's been like for you? And what are some ways that integrating your shadow has helped your own creative path?
Yeah, absolutely. So it looks different for all of us, of course, because all of us have different baggage that we've buried underneath the surface. There's a great writer called Robert Bly who writes about the shadow and Jung a lot, who talks about your shadow as this bag that you're carrying around over your shoulder. And it's really important that sometimes you get the bag out and you look around in the bag so that you know what you're carrying, you know if any of it's useful, you're aware of what is weighing you down and how you want to manage that. For me, as a maker, my shadow, the parts of myself that I bury, come out in different ways. I have a lot of baggage around curiosity, which is a key
Mm,
element of the creative practice. I think I am naturally a very curious person, but at some point in my life, I was made by society, by authority figures, by my experiences to feel that my natural curiosity was inappropriate or a distraction or not useful or in some way a negative, right? Stop asking questions and get to work. And that really impeded my creative practice for a long time. And for me, recovering and reclaiming and integrating that shadow aspect of my life has been about getting comfortable asking stupid questions, right? Getting comfortable asking any question at all, wasting people's time with questions, wasting my own time with questions, exploring. And I think I used to feel like it was inefficient. And there's been this big kind of reclaiming for me in my career as a writer that you're not going to get anywhere until you ask the questions, even if that's a really vulnerable thing to do, even if you're judging yourself and you're feeling judged. For me, that's been a real journey. And claiming that part of myself and going, okay, well, I buried my curiosity to make myself feel safe. I put it in the shadow because that's a safe place to go. I like to think of the shadow, it sounds like a negative, dark space, but also in the summer, we seek out the shadow because it's safe, it keeps us
mm,
cool. And so I like to think, okay, I put it over there in the shade where it was safe. So it wasn't there was this part of me that wasn't burning to a crisp. But now I have to coax it back out into the sun and let it glitter a little
mm.
bit. In my creative practice is a safe place to do that. it's not everywhere is a safe place to let it out, but my creative practice is a safe place to do that. My writing is something that benefits from that creative or from that curiosity. And so that, for example, I think has been big for me. Maybe 10 years ago, I would have gone, oh, I don't even know if I could write a book that incorporates spirituality and magic and psychology. I wouldn't even know where to start. And it starts with asking interesting questions. It starts with going, well, what if this thing exists? What if I could assign 10 themes to different weeks and just start to probe and ask those questions? So that's an example for me. I work with a lot of creatives whose like inner critic is very loud because they were taught to perfect something before they were allowed to show it to anyone or share it with anyone. And so instead of letting themselves be very honest on the page or on the canvas, they spend a lot of time, building castles and walls around their expression, which is normal in our
Yeah.
business, but they're missing that kind of raw sense of self because they've put it away in the shadow where it's safe in the corner and it's not burning to a crisp. So yes, the shadow requires us to confront things about ourselves that we've missed out on or that we're afraid of or we've been told are bad. But often the time, the things that we reclaim, especially in a creative context, are the things that make our art unique and interesting and worthwhile. And so it is that counterbalance of the light and the dark, and they go together, right?
Mhm.
We need the night to sleep so that we can get up in the day and do things, and we need to retreat into those parts of ourselves um, that are dark, quote unquote darker, that we've been told are darker or have been hiding out, so that we can step into the daylight and shine as well.
I love that metaphor so, so much
Mm.
because you just had this major reframe that our shadow is not always a negative. It's sometimes just the safety that we need to be fully ourselves. And I think so many artists, writers, musicians can relate because, for me, and there were a few comments that I got when I was a kid, like, oh, maybe I created something that wasn't necessarily like kosher or agreeable. And instead of encouraging that creativity and curiosity, like you said, it was shut down and it was said this isn't right. But as an adult, looking back, I see how it influences my choices and the freedom that I allow myself, even though no one is telling me what to do anymore. And I have full creative freedom. I don't always feel that. And so I love this private journey where we can reclaim those parts, those sometimes a little controversial or uncomfortable things, or maybe they're not even controversial. Maybe, there was a few other moments in my life, I'm sure you can relate, where maybe I tried something new and they're like, oh, you're not that good at this. Do the other thing that you did that you were better at. And I remember for me, it was like painting buildings as a young teenager. And it's like, oh, you're not really great at perspective. Just stick to flowers. Don't worry about this. But it's like, well, what if I wanted to explore this and you just create a rule in your mind that that's not for you. You're not allowed to do that. So thank you so much for that.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I think it is, you put the nail on the head. It's the sense that how are we supposed to grow or bring depth to our lives and to our work if we're not allowed the full palette of what's beneath and what's above? I think there's something really juicy about being able to toe that line between what's scary and what comes naturally to us and find the line between those things, because often sometimes the things that are scary are actually the things that once came really naturally to us, but someone else's opinion or the way that society goes or what's quote unquote in fashion tells us it's wrong when that was never even true in the beginning.
Mhm. It's so,
Mm,
so beautiful. What would you say to an artist who is feeling like they've been just going through the motions? I think we've all felt this way.
mhm.
Something that pays the bills, something that we know gets likes on Instagram, something that's very comfortable and surface level. There's nothing wrong with that. We all have to pay our bills. Just want to put that out there. I'm all for business. But as a creative, we do crave that depth, that honesty, and that rawness that sometimes is only in the
Yeah.
shadow. What would you say to someone, especially during this season, as we go within, as there's less daylight? It's a perfect opportunity for this, right? Even if it's in private. What would you say to an artist to ease into this world and to really meet themselves?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, and this is like pot kettle, this is advice I have to constantly remind myself
Always,
of
always.
too. Um, I- you have to make for that little shadow spot. You have to make things that it's okay to leave in that shadow and not feel like everything that you do has to walk into the light of day and carry the burden of paying the bills. It's very hard when you are a creative who uses your creative work to pay the bills. I know, but I am certainly finding that at this moment in my creative life. I published 3 books in a very short period of time. I
Yeah, you
wrote
have.
them over a longer period of time, but they all came out in about two less than 2 years, and
Wow.
um, and there is a pressure to continue to deliver. Um, However, what I need is actually to create in that silo of shadow right now. My shadow space is a very safe space for me to create, and I need that. And I've spent a lot of time in the sun, and actually that retreat back into this is only for me right now. This isn't to be seen. This isn't something that has to prove anything to anyone. This isn't something that has to say something about me. That reservoir is so crucial. And if you aren't creating space for it, then everything you do is going to feel surface level because you're dragging even the deep stuff to the surface before it's ready. And I think nothing is inherently surface level, but we make it surface level when we don't give ourselves the opportunity to investigate it and to see all sides of it. And we live in a creative culture that demands from us constantly. I'm clicking, which is probably making the microphone mad. But I think the only way for us to counter that is to have that retreat. And to speak of the season, you know, the Greek myth that I associate with shadow work is Persephone, who is the daughter of the harvest goddess Demeter, and the wife of the god of the dead, Hades. And Persephone spends 6 months above ground and 6 months underground. And she's a metaphor for the seasons, right? When she's on the surface, we have harvest, we have her mother, the goddess of harvest, is happy, is full. And when she descends, her mother misses her terribly. But Persephone is having this kind of rebirth moment so that she can come back. And I think about that myth a lot because I think as creatives, we also have to have that descent into the quiet. We have to pull away from even the things and the external things that we love. I love a book launch. I love a party. I love to be out there and running workshop and being with people. But I have to do that part that's only mine. I have to descend into that darkness and let everybody wait for me. That's a really hard thing to remind yourself it's an important investment to do, but that retreat is so important. And to think of shadow work as a retreat into self instead of a vicious confrontation with your trauma is probably the first
Mm,
step to making it
yes.
feel like worthy work.
I love that reframe too. You're just full of brilliant
I
reframes today,
try.
as always. But I love that. Instead of thinking if it's going to be painful, it's going to be scary, we're going to
Yeah.
like not like what we see in the shadow, it's a retreat. And I think that, especially for this time of year, as people, so I love fall, but I know some people don't like when the light goes away. Some people are
Mhm.
summer beings, but it's such a healing time and an invitation. And I also love that you use the word investment because so many times we think, oh, we're stepping away, we're pulling away from abundance because we associate in this culture abundance with, like you said, book launches, exhibitions, sales, blah, blah, blah. But there's always so much abundance, even in those quieter, introspective seasons. So thank you so much for that. And is there a personal story or an example of how shadow work or anything that you share in this brilliant book has helped you get to that next idea or the next step in your life? Anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I feel like I'm in a real season of my own shadow right now, which is it's fun to be talking about this book whilst I'm kind of having to relearn the process all over again. I wrote it, funnily enough, during a period of where I was in daylight a lot. Both I wrote it in the summer, and I wrote it during a period where everything was really loud in my life, and I personally right now creatively and personally in my relationships in the way that I go about my life, I'm feeling this real call to retreat. And I'm finding for me that's a very scary thing to do because I don't quite know what the thing is yet. However, I can see that that intention of retreat is already really benefiting my creative work. I've begun to dabble in visual medium, which I've taken a long break from because that didn't feel productive, right? I'm not a selling visual artist. That is something that I do only for me. That is something that
Mm,
I also have to reckon with my own imperfection with. I'm naturally, and I have always been praised, and my writing has never been cast into shadow, but my visual work, it's a different story. And so allowing myself to come to that work is for me an exercise in shadow, in reaching into the spaces that I don't normally shine a light on. And I'm working on a novel, and
mm,
I carry a lot of shadow around novel because I put fiction on a pedestal as a writer. And so I've often kind of um, internalized in this idea that I'm not good enough to write a novel, or that I don't have what it takes to write a novel, which is untrue in
mhm.
every sense. I've written 3 books. I can write a novel, but I have to really, in order to live in that creative space, I have to say, well, I'm not gonna produce another book like my past 3 for a while. I have to let that part of my career slow down, which is terrifying,
Mm.
in order for this other part of me to start to come to the surface. And I think I'm going through that right now. As I was writing the book, as I was writing Shadow Path, I think a lot of what I was discovering was um, allowing myself to be more of a companion than an expert. I
Mm.
was learning a lot as I was writing the book, and in my previous works, I had felt very confident about every aspect of the material. I didn't need to do a lot of research. It was all in my head already. It was all in me. It came, I wouldn't say easily, but I would say I knew it was in there. And
Mhm.
as I was writing The Shadow Path, I think I was discovering what that was alongside the period of time I was writing it. And so I knew enough, but I didn't know everything. And I really had to reckon with this idea that I knew enough, but I wasn't I didn't have a PhD in Jungian psychology, and I was not there to be the perfect expert. I was there to be a friend on the way, and to be making those discoveries. And for me, that was a real reframe for me to step in to allow myself to retreat from this perfect idea I had of who I had to be in order to shine a light on myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I can totally relate. It's different types of work, and
Mhm.
we get into a comfort mode, even though we often forget when we first started with any body of work, we felt that discomfort and it wasn't natural, but it became natural. So that's a beautiful reminder that this too, if there is something on your heart that you want to create, even if it feels clunky right now, you're gonna build the skills and the muscles to bring it forth. So thank you so much for sharing that, Chelsea. Well, this is so beautiful. So aside from picking up a copy of The Shadow Path, what would you say is the first step for our listeners to meet their shadow? Would you give like a little tiny exercise to give them a teaser?
Yeah, do you know, I think there is this really simple but hard thing that happens. I do it a lot. A lot of people that I know have this tendency to, negative self-talk to oneself. And sometimes it even comes out of, your mouth out loud. You're having a thought and you're like, God, that's so stupid, or that's so silly, or I could never. And I think catching those moments when they happen is a really good indicator that your shadow is asking for something.
Mm,
That message is a reflection of what caused you to bury that thing about yourself. You're having this idea, and immediately something in your brain is catching you off and going, mm-mm, not safe, not good, I don't want to do it. And that's the invitation, right? Shadow work comes hand in hand with inner child work a lot. So anybody who's kind of familiar with that space will have heard some version of this exercise as well. But as soon as you catch that negative self thought, your job is to go, what do I do to make it safe? Okay, what do I do to make it
Mm.
safe for me to be stupid right now, or for me to be too ambitious, or for me to be the person who does this, even if I'm unqualified? And if that means I just write about it in my notebook and I never show anyone, but I gave myself that space to do that expression I needed in that moment, or even if I just reflect back into myself, it's not that stupid.
Mm.
It's okay. I don't think you're stupid, self. Shadow. I think that's a really wonderful way to start to change the DNA of your relationship, to go from you're not a scary dark dungeon place, inner critic, shadow, um, whatever. You just need me to make this space feel safe for you.
Mm.
You need safety, and let me give it to you. I think that's the first step.
Beautiful. I love that. Yeah, just making yourself feel safe and seen.
Hmm.
It's the hardest the hardest and the
Yeah,
simplest advice.
exactly.
But it's so true. Chelsea, thank you so much for coming back on the show. Where can our listeners find you? Where can they get a copy of this book? And what else do you have going on right now?
Wow, so much. People can find me online at tarotforcreativity.com, or on my Substack, theshuffle.substack.com. I'm also on Instagram at pipcardstarot. If you search Chelsey Pippin Mizzi, you'll find all the places. Um, where can people get this book? It is available everywhere globally now. Not a lot of bookstores in the US are carrying it yet, but it is available online order from all bookstores in the US. You can also call up or visit your local independent bookshop and ask them to order it in for you. If you are not put off by the sound of my voice, the audiobook is read by me. So if you'd like that,
A lovely voice.
if you'd like to hear more of me, you can get the audiobook. I was very lucky. I am married to a creative myself who runs a music studio, so I got to record with him as my producer, which was a
Oh,
really lovely
awesome.
gift on that project. And what am I working on now? Well, I'm not working on a lot, but I do run a weekly tarot journaling club where we work with the cards, we work with Oracle, we work with the Zodiac, we work with tarot cards from a creative point of view. Next week we're doing Libra art journaling.
Ooh.
And we do incorporate elements of this book, The Shadow Path, as well. In future, I can't say when, we'll do a read along of this book as well. So if that's something you're interested in, you can find more information about that on my
And I
Substack.
Yeah, I love being a
And
part
I'd
of your
love to have you.
Substack. I learn so much from you all the time. And okay, so I'm going to link all your books to our listeners. As always, they're all individually brilliant and different.
Thank you.
Do you have any other resources for someone who's curious about tarot, astrology, any favorite like books or
Yeah.
podcasts or anything like that that people can also explore? I always love to have like a plethora of rabbit holes for people to go down.
Absolutely. For tarot, I will recommend for creatives the brilliant book by Jessica Dore, Tarot for Change, which
Mm.
combines a lot of psychological insight. Jessica's a social worker as well, and folklore into a tarot reading. So if you've worked with my book, Tarot for Creativity, and you're looking for some more to put some more meat on your tarot bones,
Yes.
Tarot for Change is an incredible resource. That's one of my favorites. Um, Shadow work wise, there are some really great different resources out there. I like Jungian online. They run a lot of courses. I did self-portraiture in the shadow course with them
Ooh.
earlier this year. I think it's Jungian online. I'll confirm for you.
That's so cool. That sounds
And
perfect.
yeah, really brilliant. And there's a lovely podcast, not podcast. There's a lovely Substack run by Alyssa Polizzi called The Artemisian, which really goes deep into myth and archetype and shadow work. It's recommended in the back of this book as well because I think Alyssa's work is incredible and for the artistically inclined, really evocative. So I definitely recommend her work as a follow-up. And I will say one more because this combines the two. For tarot and for shadow work, my friend Shannon at the Tarot Diagnosis has a book about shadow work coming out later this year. And so if you've done the shadow path and met your shadow and you're ready for the next stage of that, her book, Dark Shadow, Golden Shadow, will be out later this year. And she's also a
Hmm.
brilliant tarotist and a certified therapist. So lots of cool stuff at the intersection there.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I feel like I'm at the I'm like a squirrel with books right now where I'm getting ready for those cozy dark nights with candles and
Mhm.
tea where I'm going to be diving into all these things and of course continuing my personal shadow work with the shadow path by you. Chelsea, thank you so much for coming on the show and for your time and I'm so grateful to be in your world and so grateful for all the resources you provide.
I feel the same. Thank you so much. It's been a joy.
Thank you so much.